Jerod Mayo is a guy who is quiet around the media, John Adams, and you probably know that as well. But even from a day to day, the guys that were there each and every day, he just didn't talk a lot. He was always a fine interview. He left the NFL early, which I thought at the time was a bit surprising. You thought he had 3 or 4 years left in him, and now he's climbed the coaching tree. So I'm a bit surprised, not because I doubted him in any shape, form, or fashion, but I didn't think he would be the guy who might very well replace Bill Belichick. Let me get your thoughts right now on Jerod Mayo and some of the smartest former Tennessee players that you've covered, or coaches for that matter, because one former Tennessee coach thinks Michael Penix can't play, and maybe after last night he's right.
What the? What was he thinking?
Release the hounds.
The Dave Hooker Show.
Keep cool.
A presentation of offthehooksports.com.
All right, so Jerod Mayo, smartest Vol since Peyton Manning. Well, let me start with you, Caleb Calhoun. What sort of names should we be throwing out there? Because that's about 28 years since Peyton Manning showed up on campus. So it seems like that statement is a little bit strong at this point.
Well, I mean, there's a player after Jerod Mayo that we have to consider, and his name is Josh Dobbs. I mean, the guy is an astrophysicist, and Dave, you may hate that talking point, but he is.
I don't hate that talking. I say one thing, John. I just think it's funny how, do you not think it's funny how on every broadcast that every single broadcast works out how he's an aerospace engineer, right?
Yes.
Yes. It reminds me, God rest his soul, of every single Steve McNair broadcast was he's a warrior. He's incredible. He's at a different level of toughness than the rest of these schlubs out here playing in the NFL, right?
Yeah, I mean, but that's such an unusual thing when you go aerospace. I mean, I think they're probably, because it's been repeated so often, I believe some people think that Joshua Dobbs has walked on the moon.
He hasn't?
I don't think so. You might want to check that.
He's on the next flight, right? All right. Who are some of the smartest balls that you covered? Because I'll look at it in retrospect, and Jerod Mayo has to be up there. Josh Dobbs has to be up there as well. I'm going to throw one out there, Darwin Walker, who was an engineer as well. But who are the just eye-to-eye contact? I don't care what they did after their lives. Who are some of the smartest balls that you've covered in your life there, John?
Travis Henry comes to mind.
He's got to be joking.
Peyton Manning, of course.
I believe you went there.
Gosh, I mean, here's the thing about that, Dave. Somebody can be a really good interview and dumber than a doorknob. I mean, that's true to interviewing. So I'm reluctant to say how somebody might have been not very talkative and not a great interview and might have been brilliant. So I'm really hesitant to say. I mean, if you want to talk, that's just hard for me to say who was the smartest Vol.
Well, and there's the difference between on-field IQ. Like, for instance, I think Joe Milton is highly intelligent. However, do I think he processes information quickly on a football field? His IQ may be higher than all of ours. I don't know. But when it comes to the quick processing, I think that's a different part of the brain.
But how can you say he's highly intelligent? On what basis do you make that?
I don't know. I'm just saying he might be, but I've seen guys that are, I think, highly intelligent that don't process as quickly on the football field.
Sure.
And Hendon Hooker, and he may sit down and take an IQ test, and one might, and Milton might be higher. But when it comes to processing on the football field, I think it's pretty obvious that Hendon Hooker does that at a higher level. And when you talk about one of the players that I covered that I thought was very highly intelligent would have been Darwin Walker. I'm sure you remember him, Caleb. Well thought out answers, got his engineering degree. So I think you have to include some school in that.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because there's not just processing on a football field and then being smart, like smart, intelligent, like book smart, but then there is the old phrase, there is street smart, because the guy I'm about to say is book smart and not street smart at all because he makes very dumb decisions. But we're all forgetting him. I think he had a perfect Wonderlic score, and he has the greatest name of all time, Jim Bob Cooter, guys. May not
Is
be
Jim Bob Cooter the smartest Vol of all time? And the irony in that.
I mean, when he's not cuddling with people against their will, we have to say that Jim Bob Cooter actually, I think he had a perfect Wonderlic score, and he's a genius OC. So, I thought when there was a John Gruden pipe dream a few years ago at Tennessee that they could get John Gruden and Jim Bob Cooter would be hired as OC.
Yeah. Travis Henry getting some shout outs on the message board. I'm not going to read them, but if you're on our audio platforms, you need to go ahead and get on the video platform as well. I'll read this one. Henry only did 2 things to the max, running the ball, and
y'all leave Travis Henry alone. He was the hardest runner.
I agree. I think that's a little much, especially what Me Drinker has to say right there. And then I see that Hoghead says I feel bad for Henry's 47 children. It's
guys.
Not that
seriously, Dave. Travis Henry was one of my favorite players at UT. He played about as hard as anybody ever did there, and sacrificed his body. I can still see him leaping the line of scrimmage against Vanderbilt on the goal line, and I thought he was a good interview too.
So I remember that. Was a good interview. I kind of thought you were joking about that at first.
It was a really good interview.
I did think Travis Henry was a great team player. And usually running backs, and just by nature of the position, they should, they're oftentimes selfish players because a running back is just a position where you can kind of be selfish. But I never thought Travis Henry was a selfish player at Tennessee. You're right, John. He ran hard. I mean, the 2 hardest runners I ever saw at Tennessee were Travis Henry and Montario Hardesty. And I had a lot of respect for both of them. Speaking of Hardesty, y'all may not like him, and I know he can be annoying, but I think Arian Foster is pretty smart. It's another smart Vol.
Is he smart or is he act smart? I'm not going to get into
So you think he's Aaron Rodgers?
That may be. John has had an incredible reach.
No, I mean he's I think Aaron Rodgers tries really hard to show how smart he is. He does some things that would be considered unusual, I'll just put it that way. And he has some unusual takes on things. And that doesn't mean he's not bright. He may be bright. I don't know. Arian Foster may be bright. You don't have to be smart to hold on to the football. I know that.
No, and his fumbles, Caleb, we talked about this, weren't as bad as some other ones.
They just came at the worst times.
Yeah, they were the absolute worst times.
Yeah.
And that clearly.
And by the way, the Florida game fumble in 2007 that people got mad at him for, and it was 28-20. People forget this, but that was Ainge had handed it off with the wrong hand because he had the jam pinky. And so I think Foster was a little bit thrown off with the ball not being placed in his chest the way it was. And so that fumble was actually a little bit more on Ainge than it was on Foster, the Florida game.
So we won't count that one.
I'm just saying. And then another one was
got to hold the ball. I don't care how he gets it. He's got to hold the ball.
Oh, so John Adams is one of those, if you can touch it, you can catch it type of dudes.
No, not touch it. If you get both hands on it, you should hold it.
True. I'll give you that. That's fair. I'm just trying to be a little bit fair to him for that specific fumble.
Well, theoretically, you should.
Overly fair. He was one of these guys who was a better NFL player by far than he was a college player.
Well, he battled injuries in college, though.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of those dudes over the past few years. There were some guys in the latter years of the Philip Fulmer era that didn't care as much because they had seen how star players were treated and how players that couldn't contribute were treated. And then you get into the decade of just blah, 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 blah. So there's a lot of guys over the past 15 years before the past 3 years. Well, even some, if you want to start talking about the Velases of the world that have done better in the NFL than at UT. I think that's going to start to change itself a bit.